Hello everyone, welcome back, part 5 of this series called Fundamental Principles of Syntropic Agroforestry. This is the last part. It kind of became a big part when I started to look into my notes, because the idea here is for us to start to move in a process of decision making which I find to be a bit more humane. To me, I absolutely love the framework from Syntropic Agroforestry. I think it's really great. It's the best I've seen put together, but I still find it very, very technical, let's say. I find it difficult to relate to a lot of those concepts on a human level. On an intellectual level, on a conceptual level, I think they are absolutely fantastic. So what I'm part of my process as I've been working with Syntropic Agroforestry is how can I humanize this process? How can I actually forge that connection, which I've been saying, I think in all of the parts before, that human connection with the environment. How can we get out of our head a bit with all those concepts of stratification and succession, and how we can get more into our heart and into our limbs, into our actions, because I really think that this is the key part in making syntropic agroforestry happening. I think it's great to have such a beautiful conceptual framework, and it really helps into the design, into putting things together. But what I'm finding is when it gets into the management stage, they can get a little bit on the way of your decision making. Sometimes I made decisions that was based on a theoretical framework, and the reality of it came out quite unpleasant, let's say it. So I'm finding that by me relating to my systems, not so much as optimizing photosynthesis, because again, I can't really relate to photosynthesis as well. I can understand conceptually, but on how can I relate to it in a living sense. So how alive is my system? Because I have within my body of many different ways of understanding livingness, or how alive things are. I can see things, I can change, I can touch things, I can smell things, which really help me to make decisions on composing and making sure that my management is moving things forward and not slowing things down. So in that sense then, what I would like to talk in this series is, we have to kind of understand a little bit of our human consciousness and its evolution. How do we get here, that we feel so separate from nature once we compared ourselves to, indigenous and aboriginal cultures. We also then need to understand polarities, because polarities is how everything is moving. So once you understand the movements between polarities, we really start to connect our consciousness to those polarities. We start to understand how things are moving. Then our management becomes a lot more living, a lot more precise in a sense as well, on how we're going to guide it. And then finally, I really like this elemental mandala, which is not something that it's mine. It's kind of an alchemical tool, where many people before us used it to really look at that movement, at that process. But I think all of those three themes are quite big in themselves, and so I've decided to split this part 5 into 3 parts, to give me a bit more time as well to perhaps expand on some of those ideas, but also to slow down the process, because this to me is much more important than all those succession and stratification, because this is where we really connect with our land, with nature, and we make decisions together. All right, so we will move from that decision-making principle that's all about how do we make decisions into that human consciousness now. So in terms of human consciousness, what I would like to talk today is a little bit about the evolution, how we got to here, how does then the natural world relate to our consciousness, and then finally how can we enliven some of our senses to help us then really connect with the natural world and make those decisions together. So for me it's very clear, that the evolution of the planet, the evolution of Mother Earth is directly connected to the evolution of human consciousness. It has been so far, and I think it will continue into the future. I think there is a little bit of an illusion that if there is no human beings, the planet will carry out just fine. I certainly don't believe that. I believe that we are one and the same. And without humans, I don't think the planet will move forward. We are here to work together so we can both move forward. But there has been, of course, there has been a process of evolution. I think we are a bit naive to think that people that came before us was exactly the same as us. I mean, I look at my parents and I can see many differences. If I think about my grandparents, then even more difference. I didn't have the pleasure to meet my grandparents, but I would imagine that would be even a bigger change. So imagine now, moving 2, 3, 4,000 years in the past, or even at the time of Christ, or going even further to the Romans or the Egyptians, or the ancient India. I think it's a bit naive to believe that people in ancient India were making decisions like we do it today. So to me, it's very clear there has been a process of separation. Basically, our consciousness moved. I'm not saying that it's better or worse. I'm just saying that there has been motion. Life is about movement, and I think our consciousness has been moving as well. So we've been moving from a process where I am one with nature, which is really all the Aboriginal cultures and indigenous philosophy. It's all about this. The human being at that stage is one with nature. There is no separation. That there is no science about nature. It's about how well we're making those decisions together. And then over time, as we evolved and as the planet evolved, and especially as agriculture evolved, because I think agriculture plays a very, very important function in these developments. Once we start to cultivate crops and grains and animals, that allows other things to happen. And so when we started from a hunter-gathering consciousness, in a sense that we were a child of the planet, we were, in a sense, being told what to do by nature. We were one with nature. We were nature. So we knew how to find berries and animals and things for our survival. So we were being fed by nature, just like a mother feeds a child. And then after God knows how many years, we started to develop a little bit, how about, if I keep some of those grains that I like to eat nearby, or some of those berries, or some of those trees nearby. So it slowly started to have that separation where now it's not nature that's telling me what to do, but it's me starting to go, what about this, what about that? And what happens when I prune a tree? What happens when, how can I start to manipulate and the environment to have better yields or bigger yields or different fruits and different crops and different things. And once you start to do that, we start to gain more time. Instead of being walking every day to find food, now we have time, especially in winter perhaps, to rest because we have grains in our cellars and things like that. So we move from being a child of the planet to becoming kind of married to the planet, where we now need to look after things. We become a spouse of the planet, and we grow and we become, more productive, let's say. So you separate it a little bit. We still got a planet consciousness. Still, it's kind of this separating process, but now we're becoming a little bit more autonomous as human. And then that process continues. We now start to bring technology into the equation. So now our separations start to become a lot more clear. There is a very clear change of consciousness with technology. It's once again naive to think that watching TV and screens, or or tractors, or even arrows with iron points and things like that is a change of consciousness on how we do things. And we kind of come into this, technological approach that we are now a part of it. where it's all about innovation. But when we think about innovation, there is nothing really new in innovation. Innovation is just a way of reworking what we already know. So it's basically reworking with a known activity and trying to make it a little bit more efficient. But with that technology as well, we are really now separate from the planet. Modern human beings don't see themselves in nature as one. We see themselves as very separate. This is a corn, it's separate from me. I eat, you become me. But there is that very clear separation on how do we do things. And with that now, we're starting to disregard the natural world, just thinking as resource. Oh, that is just timber, that is just this. So it's all just passing by us as we walk, because we are now so within our own experience and within our own consciousness. We are so separate from this planet that it's difficult now to relate and understand where is it actually wanting to move. And I think that's a very important process, where it is important for us to be separate, for me to be now being as individual, so I can bring my own gifts into the society. But I now have to move from this technological spouse relationship with the planet with one of more of a stewardship. And for me to be a steward with the planet, I need to start to connect with it a little bit differently. Not so much, not so heady, where everything there is a cause and effect, that I'm looking for those physical laws, but something that will involve other faculties that we need to start to bring into the equation to see how things are moving. So one thing that we really need to start to pay attention is that our mind has really become a convergent mind, and we need to start to move into more a divergent mind. Meaning, convergent is everything converges into a point. So it becomes very clear that what is a point and what's not a point, what's the cause and what's the effect. So we are really getting caught into that. And that applies, a lot of our technology came about through that thinking, by looking at the processes in mineral world, which is the world that it's not so alive, it's very lawful. So it's very easy to say a cause and effect on that dead world. However, once we move into the living world, when we're looking at living forces and how things move in relationship to time, we have to move away from this convergent mindset, where there is a right and a wrong answer for everything, into a mindset where there are possible solutions, and even an answer that is absolute opposite to what I believe to be true also holds a part of the truth. So, and part of that process that we can see now is that we have like a menu consciousness happening. People are losing their capacity to find solutions, because the menu that they are given of the possibilities are fixed. And that's really harming us, because we have something in us that would like to find a new solution, but all that society gives us is that menu. And this is right and this is wrong. And if you don't agree with what I think is right, then I have to exclude you from society, or I have to put sanctions on you, or you have to move away. So with that on and off computer consciousness, right or wrong, that basically we are driving a society that is very fearful, because if everything there is a right and a wrong and just one, then of course everybody wants to be on the right. But if that starts to affect our inner consciousness, it's a big problem. We can see that everywhere, where I'm trying to force my rightness into other people and vice versa. Whereas when we move into this divergent consciousness, instead of being a right and a wrong, there is this understanding that, hey, let's work this out. That I understand that from your point of view you are right, from my point of view I might be right. Let's put them together and see where there is a higher truth. And that's really interesting, because there has been really good research done on these changes. So basically, when a newborn and a child is born, it has a very, very strong divergent consciousness. It's not looking at causes and effects. It can accept a myriad of possibilities. And between 1 and 7 years, it's about 98% divergent thinking. And then we grow up, we go to school, And then this divergence, that ability to accept a bigger reality and bigger point of view starts to get significantly affected. Between 8 and 15, it drops to about 50%. And then later on, between 15 and 21, it drops to about 30%. So we are clearly reducing our capacity to understand the living world as we go to school. And we are treating everything as dead and fixed, and therefore there is a cause and effect for everything, rather than seeing everything as alive, as moving, where there is a number of possibilities for things to move about. So in saying that, it's also important to understand, how does our consciousness work? How do we relate to things? And basically, we are picture beings. We are beings that hold pictures in our inner world, and through those inner pictures, we are then influenced, or we kind of start to make decisions. So our thought process really is about inner pictures. But the issue with inner pictures in this day, which as I understand is the key task of the human being at this point in time, is how do we control a little bit of those inner pictures? And there is a very significant, attack, or let's say, in that faculty, with all the screens and everything that we are getting, those pictures that we are getting, they are all fixed, they are all finished. We are not using our capacity to move those pictures in a way that then we can see transitions. You can see how pictures move in time. So what we are getting is that I'm getting little snapshots, little dot points, and then I'm trying to connect them, and then I'm saying, this is what I know. I know this point, I know that point, I know that point, therefore the truth is doom, doom, doom. But we gotta understand is that if you only have 3 pictures and you gotta compose a movie out of that, we have a problem now, because it's difficult to move those pictures in a way that they could actually go up and down or backwards or forwards in other directions, because those dots, they might not be in the right location. There might be 200 dots in between each of those dots that actually changes the interpretation of those dots. So what happens in our knowledge is that we find those pictures and we say, this I know. And at the moment that you say, I know, that is the moment that you stopped knowing. So basically, you formed a line between those dots and you said, this is the reality. So we need to start moving away of those fixed pictures and start to focus our attention in between the pictures, because that's where life is happening. That's where movement is taking place. And the more we start to pay attention to what is between those inner pictures, we start to develop a faculty of imagination. And that faculty of imagination then allows us to see the movement of things. I can look at a plant today, and then I can look at a plant tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after. So I have a number of pictures of that plant, and then through my imagination, through my capacity of moving pictures inside of me, I am able then to see how things are moving. And once I see how things are moving, I'm then able to intervene and see if I can change the direction of movement based on all those observations. So the focus really is not where the dots that I know are, and I can keep finding them, but where are the gaps between the dots that I don't know. So life becomes a lot more interesting then, and a little bit more scary too, because you thought you know a lot, and once you start to looking at the gaps between the dots, you know that we don't really know too much. So we also need to just distinguish them between what's fantasy and what's imagination, because imagination is the factor that we need to cultivate. And basically fantasy is where most people are living, where we are getting those inner pictures from left, right, and center, from Facebook and Instagram and television and nature as well. We are collecting pictures, but we are doing nothing with them. So basically those pictures then start to throw, as Dennis Klocek says, a beer party within us, and we are off with the fairies, kind of making decisions based on those pictures that are very fantastical. So we really need to have a process of imagination where we bring those pictures into a level of cognition, where we understand processes and we are able to distinguish between what is a process that is moving and what is a substance that is kind of dead. So the end product of a process is a substance. And once that substance gets consumed, it starts a process. And we all have taken things that have taken us into a journey, be it a psychedelic drug, be it a medicine, be it some kind of food that you have an allergy. So there is a substance there that as soon as it gets ingested, it starts a process. And we need to understand how that substance moved into time. And when we are looking at our plants and we think, I'm going to put this substance, I'm going to put a bit of calcium, or I'm going to put a little nitrogen. So once you are doing that, what is the process then that you are initiating? And is that the better way to go about? Or is it better to then initiate a process that the result of that process will then be that substance? So, in other words, am I better to put nitrogen as urea in my plants, so I'm putting a substance that will drive a process? Or am I better to put plants that will start a process that will fix nitrogen into my soil, and then I'm kind of I'm working with the process of the nitrogen coming in and then being used, or just relying on a substance? So really here we have to, the question for me in syntropic agroforestry is not about substance, it's not about plants, it's not about space, it's about time. It's all about how are things moving in time. Because then if we are able to imagine how things are moving in time, we are able to change how things move without needing to bring lots of money and lots of substance and lots of technology that are expensive. We can just pay attention in the movement of time and when we do our actions. So that to me is a key understanding. I mean, there is so much more to that, but as a presentation, in how things have moved, how we have separated, and how now we have to bring it back together into we are one with nature, but I am an individual too. So there is now this polarity of the collective and the individual coming back. So the natural world then, we need to start to imagine and really interact with the natural world, not as a thing, not as a piece of timber, not as, oh, this is a camphor laurel, this is a poplar, this is an olive tree. It's like, no, these trees, these animals, these things that we keep saying, they are beings. Beings because they are moving in time, they are alive. Anything that moves in time, that changes through time, is alive. So that imagination then, anything in the real world, I mean, you can even do it with rocks, but rocks move through time very, very slowly. But plants and animals move through time rather quick, and we do too. So we have to start to look at the natural world not so much as resources, but as an organism. Meaning we have to start not looking at the world as we are at the moment, as we are separate, but try to look in the world with the natural world. That's how, in the past we used to do, but it used to be done by instinct. We are instinctually looking with the world, and now we are not. So now we need to work in that faculty of cognition to start to look with the world, to allow the phenomena of the world to speak. So we gotta move outside of our reasoning into our sensing. We gotta start to sense the world, and we have to use all of our senses to then connect to the beingness, to the living characteristics of our environment. Because really, the environment is dictating, so that flowing time, that relationship through time that the natural world has, is how it relates to itself as an individual, to its species, to its genus, to that idea of collectivism. So it is about that flowing time in relationship with the environment that dictates the relationships between things, between beings in the natural world. And so that natural world then develops a will. So it has a will to evolve. It has a will to move forward. it has a will to differentiate, it has a will to keep moving in time and changing in time, just like we do. So to me, the question is, how can we match nature's will with our will? So nature's future, because the will is about the future, it's about the time frame that's coming from the future to us, how can we marry that with my will, so where I want to move in time? So once we are able to marry those, then things becomes a lot more powerful. And to me, agriculture, just like it was a critical tool or a critical process in our separation, it's now, in my understanding, a key process in our coming back together as an individual. But we have to look at our agroforestries, at our crops, at our corns, whatever, in that way that it's moving forward, that it's living, that agriculture is a living being, that it has its boundaries, it has its qualities, it has its challenges, it has its opportunities, but most importantly, that it's moving through time. And that's our capacity. Once we start to look into imagination, once we stop thinking that the world is a fixed picture, just like Instagram loves to tell us, and we move away from that and go that the world is not a picture, but it's an image that it's always moving, it's a movie, then we start to connect and we start to understand where is nature moving forward or wants to move forward. And then I put myself and I match my will with nature's will, and then things start to really move in a very interesting direction. And we got to understand that the natural world communicates, so the communication of the natural world with us is through pictures. It has been and it will always be. It's just that now we have a separation, now we have an option. When we used to be indigenous, when we used to be an aboriginals, when we were living at that point in time, we had pictures coming up in our consciousness that told us, you know, when we harvest the corn, or when we should do this, when should we look for animals, when should we move away from the camp because there is too much rain coming. We had those inner pictures coming towards you. And those inner pictures are still flowing. And if we actually pay attention, they actually induce an impulse of feelings and actions. It's very clear. Once you start to engage with your agroforestry systems, you will see that there is a demand for action. Once you see a plant that's starting to get weaker, or a plant that wants to come through and push through, they do affect you directly. But we now have put that separation that no, that's not true, and we start to get anxious in our minds because there is that impulse for movement and feelings, and we are saying no, well, we are not this. But once we allow to become this, once we start to pay attention on what are the feelings and what are the actions that nature is putting into our inner pictures, and we start to work with those inner pictures, start to work on how nature is moving about and how those movements are then giving us feelings and impulses for action, then things change dramatically. And then we start to allow the natural words to speak to us. We start to not saying, oh, you are a canfalora, you are a poplar, you are an olive, you are a peach, or you are a banana. No, you are a being. Talk to me. What's in you? Where do you want to move? So that is really a key part, which, you know, the Syntropic framework presents to us, that that the natural world communicates. And we have instruments to communicate. And for me, once I start to look a little bit deeper how that happened, to me, this is how it happens. It's through our inner pictures that we must learn to control and really engage with our imaginative capacity rather than be taken on a ride by our fantastical pictures that just keep popping about. We've all been there. I don't think I need to go any deeper. All right, so how then do we merge those two ideas? To me, we really need to start to enliven our senses, because that's, by being alive in our senses, that's how we are then able to be alive with the natural world. And it's really interesting because when we think about our senses, we think that it's our life, but our senses is not actually alive. We can enliven them, But my eyesight is it's pretty much just like a camera at the moment. It's just there collecting information and getting processed. So we have all those instruments, let's call, that are infinitely more powerful than a camera, let's be honest, because we are able to do a lot more things. And we all seen a sunrise with our own eyes and then took a picture and said, well, it's not quite like that, because the pictures are not able to grasp the livingness of things, whereas we are. Our eyes, it's dead, but it conveys to us the livingness, because we are then able to relate and process through feelings and will impulses. So we must enliven those dead senses by really bringing our feelings into it. So we are now not separate anymore from the plant, but we are coming together and we are smelling and we are looking at the different colors of the green. Is it more towards the yellow? Is it more towards the purple? Is it more towards, the dark green? Which one do you think it's more alive? So we really need to do that. Once we start to do that, and how do we do that? Sorry. We do that by looking at, very simple things that we are doing all the time, which is basically our relationship with everything is sympathy, antipathy, and empathy. Meaning, do I like that or do I don't like that? So if I like this, I'm sympathetic to it. If I don't like that, then I'm antipathetic to it. So we are doing that all the time, unconsciously. Pretty much from the minute we wake up to the minute we sleep, we, throughout that period, be it 14, 15, 18, 20 hours, depends on your sleeping regime, you are doing that. You are going through that dance, like, don't like, sympathy, antipathy. And the game, to me, is how do we find the balance between all these, like, don't like, fight, don't fight, love, all these things, is to kind of have empathy. And empathy, to me, is when you have a little bit of separation, when you are able to process your likes and dislikes and kind of try to understand why you like or why you don't like. And exactly the same, we are able to do that with the natural world. We start to look for those colors, because sympathy and empathy is what color our soul life. It's what bring that motion between things. And once we start to connect with the natural world with just a little bit more separation in that regard, that gives us more clear picture, more clear imagination. So we separate our response rather than separate the feelings. So the feelings are there, but our response to kill or to run or to kiss or to eat just gives a little bit more time. So we become a little bit more empathic between that dance, and we can see how those things are moving by themselves rather than where I want them to move. And I don't like it because you're moving this way, or I don't like these aphids that are eating my plants, or I like this tomato, it's really good. It's like, is it really? Just separate and try to go deeper into why. So once we go into that why process, why do I like, why I don't like, we start to have what? Our actions starts to be permeated with thoughts. So our will becomes a thoughtful will. And our body is the best instrument to start to help us do what? Perceive movements. Where? Movements in time. This is the game for me. As I understand, as I've been playing for now 8 years, I've done so many systems, I've planted so many, I've been managing and trying to understand the flows. It's all about the timing of things. It's when we are doing those activities that really matter. The activity itself, yes, it plays a role, but if I'm going to choose to manage in the appropriate time, where the weather patterns are working, where I've observed that there is this relationship that is starting to change, that is starting to move where I don't want it to move. When you come and you intervene with that level of consciousness, with that level of interaction and participation, then the decision making, it becomes much more pleasurable, but it becomes much more real. I've done a lot of decision makings that I'm doing from the outside, and I'm not really understanding how things are moving because I'm not there. I'm just looking from the outside. I'm not in it. So you start to go like this, like this, like from here, and you don't have that separation. You just come in and you attack, let's say, and the consequences are quite frustrating because you were not living it. You were just reasoning it. You were just kind of making some logical sequences based on the theories of syntropic agroforestry, which are great and are very plausible. But if you are not there living, it's bad decisions. And if you're not then able to associate that movement in time with bigger factors like the moon, like the seasons, it becomes really, really difficult to make really good decisions. So what we gotta do is we gotta train. We gotta train ourselves a lot more, and it's a lot easier and it's a lot more pleasurable. We gotta train ourselves on how to perceive those movements. I'm not saying that we forget all of the theories that Ernest has put together. No, they are really important because they help us to find things to look into, you know, those relationships. But then we gotta transcend the rationality of those relationships into a sensorial, so you can depict them in your own mind, in your own pictures, and you can move those pictures. And once you move those pictures, you can then start to see if that movement is a lawful movement or not, or it's likely to be lawful or not. So that will really then starts to help you and help me and help us to make better decisions. So what we gotta do is, you know, let's look at the plant and let's not just say, you are a tomato. We gotta interact with that plant individually. We gotta see what are the core aspects of that plant. Does it grow like this? Does it grow like that? Does it grow like this? You know, is the leaf big, fat, skinny? How does it shape? What are the aspects? What are the key qualities of those plants that we are looking for? You know, do we want a really leggy tomato? Do we look at a really bushy tomato? So if the tomato that we have in our mind is supposed to be really bushy and is getting really leggy, I wonder what's happening. How is that moving in time? So by having this qualitative assessment of our plants as individual beings, we start to see how they are moving in time. We start to see how nature is working, and then hopefully we are able to marry our actions, the rhythms of our actions, with the rhythms in nature, and then really bring that together. And by having this synergistic effect of bringing things together in one time, then we amplify the potential of that action. So to me, it's really this relating and asking questions, but the answer is almost irrelevant. Because what I find is people start that process and they go, oh, but why is the tomato leggy? And then you start to going through all the possibilities. Oh, it's been too cold, oh, it's been too wet, oh, it's been too dark, oh, it's no. And that it doesn't really matter. To me, the most important is raise the question and stick with the question, because as you keep coming, those questions will morph into bigger questions, into bigger cycles, and that to me is the game. Is can we hold many questions so we can move away from cause and effect, from this causes that 100% of the time, to hey, there is a pattern here. This tends to move towards there. But the polar opposite is equally true, depending on the conditions. So we must be able to hold the polarities, and I'll talk about polarities in the next class. We must be able to hold the polarities, both ends, as equally truthful into a bigger truth. So we are then really needing to pay attention on seasonal changes. You know, what are the gaps in our knowledges so we can keep making better images in us? You know, how are things changing? Is there a key change in state? Because a lot of the times we keep following things and then there is a massive change in state. And I always go back into water. You know, water is a liquid. You keep removing 1 degree in temperature a day. There is a point that this 1 degree is a massive shift. it goes from liquid into solid. And I think that is really what's happening a lot in our planet right now with the climate crises, where we've been, taking and taking and taking little bits for so long that we are now close to this, state shift, and we are having lots of little bursts of dry and wet and cold and hot just starting to pop. But these are not because of what we've done yesterday, of what we've done last year. That is just one increment in time. That's for what we've been doing for thousands and thousands of years. And sure, now things have escalated because now we've got, I don't know, 8, 9 billion people. So the exponential growth now, every unit in time becomes a massive shift. But that's what we got to work with, because now we have these understandings where we can start to work and try to then make the loop backwards towards the collective, towards becoming a steward of the planet and not just a resource hungry thing. We've been there, we've grown up, we now, like a teenager that is just going, meh, 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 give me more hamburgers. We've been there, but now we became an adult. Now it's time to look after the mother. And we do that, and we connect with that through our inner pictures, through our imagination, because that's how nature speaks to us. And we marry the two, and boom, boom. There is no, there is no climate crisis anymore. We become truly humans as individuals connected with the natural world in a beautiful, harmonious marriage. All right. This is it for this part of that part 5. So we must understand those relationships, in my understanding, so we can manage our systems. Perhaps not so relevant on how we're going to design the system, fair enough, but once the system is in the ground, I'm finding that working with those flows allow us to manage a lot better. And to me, management is the goal. Designing, planting, great, a lot of effort, blah, 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 but most systems get implemented and get poorly managed, and then it just the anxiety then to trying to find what is right, what is wrong, just start pushing us away from those systems, and you go, I can't do it, or this doesn't work, or blah blah blah. Whereas I'm willing, what I think we need to do is to come into our systems, do it small, make sure that the management is always happening, that things are always moving, and we know how things are moving before we give bigger steps. All right, next one, I'll talk about polarities, which to me it really helps on that understanding as well, to see the movement, because everything is moving within polarities, as you know. And that really gonna help us into the decision making, and then going to the next step, which is using the elemental mandala, which is really a natural polarity framework. That's how I'm starting to understand. So once again, thank you very much for your attention. I understand it's not the easiest of topics. So again, questions or comments are really, really appreciated. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that's useful. And I really hope that you are able to relate to your piece of land, be it just a backyard or to your flowers in your pots, in that more humane, more heart-centered way, because that to me is the pathway to lift everything else. Have a great day, and I'll catch you up soon. Take it easy.